We're kicking off today with Hendry, and now that we've said his name, fans can expect to see him next week as part of the NXT Great American Bash. During this week's show, a video played highlighting the Scottish wrestler's viral success and his career in the ring, with footage even being shown from TNA. At the end of the video, Hendry shared that he'll be returning to NXT next week for night 1 of the Bash, and that he will be hosting one of his special live in-ring concerts on the show. While fans were thrilled by the news, the Gallus stable were not, and have vowed to confront Hendry on next week's show. Gallus had a run-in with Hendry during a recent episode of NXT, and on Twitter, Joe shared that he'd littered the windshield of the Gallus mobile with flyers promoting the concert. Hendry has used these concerts in the past to take shots at wrestlers, including former WWE talent AJ Francis. And are you excited to see the viral star next week? Let us know down below. Speaking of NXT talent, the Rascalz were back on NXT this week as they teamed with Wes Lee to face Nathan Frazer, Axiom, and Javon Evans, arguably the fastest trio in NXT history. The pace of this match was beyond everything else on the show by a wide margin, and at times felt more like a TNA X Division match than an NXT tag team match. On the same night that most of the card got less than 5 minutes, this probably did not need as much time as it got, but it's hard to complain about such pure action. In the end, the Rascalz got the win, and this match shows why the NXT TNA collab has been such a treat to behold. Since WrestleMania 40, the Bloodline has been nothing short of chaotic, with Solo Sikoa now assuming control of the group in the absence of Roman Reigns. The group's path of destruction has left fans wondering who on earth could stop the revamped faction, and Michael Cole may have dropped a major hint during this week's Raw. During the main event tag team match, Cole spoke of Jey Uso and Sami Zayn teaming together once again, and made several references to the pair's past in the Bloodline. With SummerSlam around the corner, many are expecting the return of Roman Reigns at the event, and the prevailing theory is that we'll see a Bloodline versus Bloodline feud soon enough. If so, then it's not impossible that Jey and Sami could reunite with a face-turned Reigns to bring the fight to Solo Sikoa, and perhaps we could even see Jimmy Uso align with Reigns again. Were Cole's quips about Sami and Jey's past a tease of what's to come? It's impossible to say right now, but WWE clearly wanted fans to think of the Bloodline during Raw's main event. Do you think we could see the original Bloodline come together again to bring the fight to Solo Sikoa and his cronies? Share your thoughts in the comments. This week's Raw also saw Dominik Mysterio make clear he doesn't like Liv Morgan in a brutal promo in English and Spanish that left the Women's World Champion in tears. We now know what Mysterio said in Spanish as he asked Liv, "Do you not understand what I'm telling you, bitch? I can't understand what goes on in your head." Mysterio wasn't done yet as he used his bilingual skills to call Liv a dumbass. "I hate you with all my life." On Twitter, Liv blacked out her profile, while Rhea Ripley has been having a lot of fun, as the sobbing Liv is her profile pic, and an image of herself licking Dominik is her cover picture. Dominik has made clear his affection is only for Rhea Ripley, and we'll have to see how all of this plays into SummerSlam next month when the Women's World title is on the line. Dominik and Rhea are seemingly back together, though Dirty Dom isn't the only superstar who's had his eye on Rhea Ripley as of late. Last week, Jey Uso began trying to woo the mommy of the Judgment Day, and even said after Raw that he'd treat her by taking her to Waffle House, though this didn't sit right with Rikishi. On his Off the Top podcast, Rikishi criticized the narrative direction of his son and the potential real-life implications of a Ripley-Jey relationship on TV. "I have hair on the back of my neck standing up every time I watch him. SummerSlam, where is he? I don't know, let's write him in. He likes mommy. That's the best the writers got? Let's write him into a relationship with mommy. What y'all trying to do? Break his marriage up? You can't put him into a good storyline, so what you gonna do now? God forbid you guys try to tell them to tongue kiss each other on WWE Raw. That better not happen." It's worth remembering that Jey, Ripley, and Dominik are all married, with both Dominik and Rhea wedding their respective partners Marie and AEW's Buddy Matthews earlier this year. It's interesting that mere days ahead of the second biggest PLE of the year that Jey doesn't have a match, and his angle with Ripley is seemingly over as well, considering the reunion with Dominik. But what do you think? Did you like Jey's involvement in the Ripley-Dominik storyline, or should WWE have gone in a different direction for main event Jey as of late? More from NXT now, as Trick Williams called out All Ego Ethan Page, but was instead met with Cedric Alexander, who advised Trick not to make a serious mistake. Ashante the Adonis then interrupted to tell his tag partner he was wasting his time, and Trick added that he's better than Cedric, which frustrated the Hurt Business alum. Williams also had some choice words for Adonis, mentioning the failed runs of Hit Row in a callback one wouldn't necessarily think WWE would have made. The two agreed to a match, followed by Trick sending Adonis to the floor, and this was an odd way to kick off the show, given how little interactions Williams and Alexander have shared. In fact, the only interaction between Alexander and Trick before this show was in the background of last week, and this week's story had not been built up on TV. The problem is that Alexander and Adonis lack established characters due to years of mismanagement, and that has made this angle with a former NXT champ out of the blue. With that said, this might be a chance to truly establish the credibility of Alexander in a way that he has lacked since 205 Live went off the air, and it's the biggest spotlight he's had in years. In their match, Cedric Alexander started strong but was overwhelmed by the power and speed of Trick Williams, and the former NXT champion finished it with a trick shot. Post-match, Pete Dunne blasted Williams from behind and stomped him into the mat, suggesting that the Bruiserweight's heel turn won't be confined to just the main roster. As for the match itself, rushing this may have been a mistake, as it definitely felt like things got sloppy and the two men lacked chemistry for almost the entirety of the contest. Had Alexander had some warm-up matches to build momentum, this could have been different, and while things got better in the final stretch, this left a lot to be desired. In no DQ action, Josh Briggs took on Brooks Jensen, and thanks to a distraction by Shawn Spears, Jensen was able to batter Briggs with a steel chair before getting the win. This match between former friends could have been built more, but it was still an entertaining affair, and Spears could be the perfect man to teach the chaotic Briggs all the wrong lessons. On Raw, the Wyatt Six once again made an impact as Uncle Howdy would hit the Sister Abigail on Chad Gable, the first time the move has been used since Bray Wyatt's passing. The show would then cut to a commercial break, but thanks to a fan in Green Bay who attended the show, we now know what happened with the faction when the cameras weren't rolling. Howdy posed for the live crowd, who chanted holy shit at what they'd seen, while Otis and Maxine Dupree, who had been at ringside for the segment, left in the crowd. Otis and Maxine are no longer with Chad, who has now enlisted the Creed brothers, and this week's segment had a profound impact on Bo Dallas's sister, Mika Rotunda. On Instagram, Mika shared a collage of Bray Wyatt and Uncle Howdy, including both men hitting the Sister Abigail, alongside the message, "There you are." Mika has shared several tributes to her late brother Bray in the years since his passing, and this week's Raw shows that Wyatt's spirit is still with the WWE Universe every single week. When CM Punk returned to WWE at Survivor Series, many fans began hoping that AJ Lee would follow him, as it's been 9 years since the Divas champion was last seen in the company. It's not just fans who hope to see AJ return, as Roxanne Perez is hoping for a match with AJ Lee, and is hopeful that Punk will help convince his wife to step back in the ring. Sitting down with Pro Wrestling Illustrated, the NXT Women's Champion discussed her desire for a match with AJ, and added, "I tried to talk to CM Punk about convincing AJ to return, but he tells me that he's doing the same thing. He's trying to get her to come back, he's pulling her in, but I hope one day she decides to come back and have a match with me." AJ has been referenced on WWE TV a handful of times since Punk's return, with Drew McIntyre currently possessing Punk's bracelet with the name of his wife and their dog Larry. With that said, Punk himself said at the Money in the Bank post-show that he didn't want to give false hope that AJ's returning, and said that he's proud of all the non-wrestling projects she's a part of. Do you feel AJ Lee will somehow make her WWE return? And if so, who should her first opponent be after close to a decade? Let us know in the comments. Speaking of CM Punk, the Best in the World has seen plenty of merch released since his return last year, and one shirt in particular has caught the attention of Drew McIntyre. On the back of the shirt, the message, "Clobber McIntyre Punk," is displayed, and on Twitter, Drew referenced a line from Punk, who said he'd never had to put another man's name on his shirt. This clearly isn't the case anymore, and Drew said this quote had aged as well as Punk giving a shout out to his then friend Colt Cabana during his infamous pipe bomb in 2011. While Punk and Cabana were as close as it got at the time, the pair had an infamous falling out years later, stemming from the legal costs of a defamation lawsuit filed by a WWE doctor. The war between Drew McIntyre and CM Punk will come to a head at SummerSlam next weekend, and with Seth Rollins as the guest referee, expect anarchy in Cleveland on August 3rd. Back to NXT, and after beating Ashante the Adonis, Mensah called out Ethan Page to no answer, and a 1, 2, 3 chant by the fans was a reminder of Mensah pinning the champ last week. Later in the show, Page was in the ring to address last week's unofficial pinfall, but Mensah was able to get him in another 3 count, enraging the all-ego talent. Mensah is the right person to challenge the NXT champion next, and while a title change isn't likely, a strong performance will do wonders for his career. Wren Sinclair's efforts to be a part of the No Quarter Catch crew continued with a win over Carlee Bright, admittedly with an assist from Charlie Dempsey. While the outside storytelling of Dempsey reluctantly helping Sinclair was fun, the action in the ring was a mess, and with 3 minutes to work, Bright hardly looked comfortable leading the action. Lash legend and Jakara Jackson showed off their chemistry as a tag team by defeating Sol Ruca and Carmen Petrovic in another match that felt rushed. Post-match, Metaphor challenged Alba Fire and Isla Dawn to a tag team title match for next week, and this should be fine, even if Legend and Jackson need to be built more as a team. In 2024, WWE has signed some huge names in the world of women's wrestling, as we've seen Stephanie Vacour make her debut, and Julia is expected to wrestle later this year. Now WWE has another notable woman under contract, as Fightful Select reports that Australia's Delta has inked a deal and has finished her time competing in her own country. Delta garnered attention from WWE after attending tryouts at Elimination Chamber Perth in February, and several sources afterwards said it was believed she'd be on her way to WWE. Now that's been confirmed, and Corey Brennan of Fightful adds that WWE allowed for Delta to finish her commitments in Australia, and she's slated to move to the US this month. With that said, there's no confirmed start date at the Performance Center, though it's expected that she'll start in NXT alongside Julia and Stephanie Vacour. WWE has been making lucrative offers to bring the best women to NXT, and we'll have to see what Delta does in the Gold brand now that she's signed with the promotion. On last week's Dynamite, MJF captured the AEW International title in a nearly hour-long epic with Will Ospreay that became an instant Match of the Year candidate. This is MJF's first time holding the title, and his first title since losing the AEW World title at World's End, and it's a fitting accolade for the self-professed most interesting AEW star. Speaking to Justin Barrasso of Sports Illustrated, MJF made the bold claim that AEW has been boring without him, as he stated, "I've been carrying this company for 5 years on my back. People need MJF. It's that simple. This company needs MJF. Fortunately, they've got me. What's this company without MJF? It's boring. This is the most people have talked about my company in months. Thank me later. If you're not going to give me my just due now, you'll have to when it's all said and done. I'm the most interesting man in professional wrestling. I've been that way since I laced up a pair of boots. There are 2 types of people, the ones who admit I'm probably the greatest overall package in the history of this sport, and then there are people who want to pretend they know better. They won't admit what's right in front of them. For years, people said that John Cena was not the GOAT. They said Randy Orton was boring. Those people actually exist in the world. Those are the type of people who see mediocrity when they look in the mirror, and you can quote me on that." With MJF signing a new deal with AEW, fans can expect him to be a focal point of the company going forward, especially with the AEW International title now in his possession. MJF will soon be traveling to CMLL, where he'll defend his gold. Who do you think is the most interesting person in AEW? Let us know down in the comments. On this week's Raw, Xavier Woods, Akira Tozawa, and Otis faced the Final Testament, and while it may not have seemed like it, this was a historic match for the former King of the Ring. With this match, Woods has broken a decade-long streak, as this was his first tag team match since July 2014, where he's not competed alongside either Big E or Kofi Kingston. With WWE teasing a split of the New Day, Woods could soon find himself in a lot of tag matches without his allies, and it remains to be seen if this week's Raw was a precursor of what's to come. More from AEW now, as on last week's Collision, the Patriarchy, consisting of Christian Cage, Killswitch, and Nick Wayne, won the vacated AEW Trios Championships. The group won the title by defeating the Bang Bang Gang, and the finish saw Mama Wayne spray hairspray in Juice Robinson's eyes, allowing Cage to hit his Killswitch finisher. Unfortunately, this match didn't go perfectly for the patriarchy, as the Wrestling Observer reports that Killswitch, the wrestler, injured his arm during the match with the Bang Bang Gang. The report indicates that this is seemingly a partially torn bicep, but it's believed that Killswitch will work through it rather than take a lengthy absence from programming. With the titles only just being won, an injury is the absolute last thing Killswitch or the patriarchy needs, and we're sending our best wishes to him amid this unfortunate setback. Now, when a wrestler is released from WWE, they almost always have to deal with a non-compete clause that lasts for 90 days for main roster stars or 30 days for NXT talent. While the ex-superstars are paid during this time, it means they can't appear in another company the day after being released, and hype around them often cools off in this time. Over the years, many have spoken up against non-compete clauses, but now these clauses may be a thing of the past after a tense legal battle. While the US government sought to ban non-compete clauses, an injunction was filed blocking this, but now a Pennsylvania judge had denied the injunction blocking the ban. As of now, virtually all non-compete agreements with bosses will be banned and voided beginning September 4th in a move that could change the wrestling landscape as we know it. After all, those who were released from WWE in April are only now being able to take bookings elsewhere, and one has to wonder what they could have done without their non-competes. It remains to be seen how WWE will respond to the end of non-compete clauses and if their unique employment contracts could get around the ban. But what do you think of this? Sound off below. Thanks to the release of Who Killed WCW, a series produced by The Rock's 7 Bucks Productions, there's been a lot of talk about the company and who's to blame for its demise. Scott Steiner was with WCW until its final Nitro, where he lost the WCW World title to Booker T, and speaking to Sportskeeda, he shared his stance on who should be blamed. He said, "Anybody that says anything different don't know what the fuck they're talking about. You got a glimpse of some of it on Who Killed WCW. It was like former Turner Entertainment president Brad Siegel, all the higher-ups. It's no secret that higher-ups in Turner Entertainment were often against WCW, even feeling like the brand was bad for business, even when the company was doing very well in 1997 and 1998. Even Hulk Hogan has said that WCW's demise was due to executives and higher-ups, but expect plenty of blaming and finger-pointing, as the company's death will always be a hot topic." On the podcast, Steiner also looked at the present, namely his nephew Bron Breakker, and said that Bron's tenure on Raw has been going great so far. Steiner praised WWE's regime for pushing Breakker the right way, and his expectations, like those of many others, are sky high for the former NXT champion's future in WWE. But what do you make of Bron's Raw run? And do you agree with who Steiner has to blame for the demise of WCW? Sound off in the comments. Now, SummerSlam 2024 is less than 2 weeks away, and for Sami Zayn, competing at this year's biggest party of the summer will be extra special. As Zayn explained to Wrestling Inc., he's never competed on the SummerSlam main card, and the closest he's got is being in a tag match on the kickoff show in 2016. That match saw Zayn and Neville, now known as Pac, face the Dudley Boys in what would be their last match as a team in WWE, but now Zayn is ready to be in the spotlight in Cleveland with Bron Breakker. We've got some hiring news ahead of tonight's AEW Blood and Guts, as Melissa Santos has officially joined the company as part of the broadcast team. On Instagram, Santos, who's been an interviewer in Lucha Underground and Impact Wrestling, shared the big news and used the hashtags for announcer and backstage interviewer. The wife of Brian Cage, Santos has also worked in WOW Women of Wrestling, and now she's bringing her years of skills to the AEW broadcast production. In AEW and Ring of Honor, Eddie Kingston is not held back when it comes to getting violent, which has led to some epic and brutal moments in both companies. Tony Khan is often heralded AEW as being able to push the envelope with violence more than its rivals at WWE, but there was an idea that went too far for him. Speaking to The Ringer, Kingston shared that he wanted to replicate a spot from the 1980s in which Terry Funk tried to suffocate Ric Flair with a plastic bag at Clash of Champions 8. Kingston wanted to incorporate a similar spot into his 2022 feud with Chris Jericho, but Eddie said Turner Broadcasting was scared about the idea, and Khan rejected the pitch. Despite this, Kingston and Jericho did have a barbed wire ropes match in July of that year, but the plastic bag and suffocation was simply too much for those in charge. And we're ending today with Ronda Rousey, and before she was a featured superstar in WWE, she was dominating opponents in the world of UFC. Speaking to Sports Illustrated this week, Rousey was asked about UFC and whether a return could happen, and said she loves when people ask, as it means they miss her. While Rousey didn't explicitly turn down the idea, she's made clear she's wanting to have a lot of children, and that a return to UFC would be a detour in that plan. Rousey is already a mom and plans to have more children in the future, and if that means she's stepped foot into the octagon for the last time, that's fine with the former WWE superstar.